President Trump announcing Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company is investing $100 billion in the U.S.
TSMC first announced in 2020 it would break ground on a semiconductor manufacturing facility in Arizona. It has since pledged $65 billion in investments in that state, calling it the largest foreign direct investment in Arizona's history. TSMC also benefited from a $6.6 billion grant from the Biden administration last year from the CHIPS and Science Act.
ABC's Karen Travers at the White House. Actor Gene Hackman and his wife were dead, authorities say, 9 days before their bodies were discovered in their Santa Fe, New Mexico home. The investigation continuing, but so far no cause on how they died.
Investigators say preliminary tests have come back negative for carbon monoxide in the blood of Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa, but experts say because they had been dead for many days before they were found in their home, carbon monoxide could be hard to detect in their blood. Other toxicology tests could take weeks or longer as investigators try to answer what killed Hackman, his wife, and their dog. Alex Stone, ABC News.
Forever 21, which soared in popularity in the early 2000s, now falling on hard times, announcing it's shuttering several hundred stores around the country and laying off more than 350 workers beginning in April. Forever 21 also closing its corporate headquarters in Los Angeles, saying more people are buying clothing online. Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
Give the star in your life the brightest gift in the world. Name a star after them. This is Rocky Moselle with International Star Registry. For $59 and a call to 800-282-3333 or visit starregistry.com, you can name a star for birthdays, weddings, or even memorials. Over 45 years, we have named millions of stars for celebrities and individuals from around the world. The star you name will be recorded in book form in the U.S. Copyright Office. Visit starregistry.com or call 800-282-3333.
News Talk 610 AM and 102.1 FM. KVNU.
4:05, and with your KVNU News update this hour, I'm Will Theroy. Roger Dowling, Chief Executive Officer of Blackstone Products, was recently named the new CEO of Weber, another outdoor grill company. Now, the two grill manufacturers are expected to merge sometime this year, pending approval, and will eventually be led by Dowling. Now, Weber is an iconic global barbecue grilling company that has been around for 70-plus years and has a history of innovation and exceptional quality and consumer value. Now, Blackstone, on the other hand, is relatively new. It was founded in 2008 by Dowling of Cache Valley. Blackstone offers a wide portfolio of grill products and services for customers in more than 70 countries. Now, the company has seen significant growth as consumers continue to demonstrate their enthusiasm for Blackstone's innovative griddle products and outdoor cooking accessories. Now, the transaction is expected to close early this year and is subject to regulatory clearance and other customary closing conditions. Until that time, Weber and Blackstone will continue to operate as separate independent companies. Now, upon completion of the transaction, the combined company will still maintain its presence in both Palatine, Illinois, and also here in Logan. Well, Idaho State Police say that they are investigating a homicide after a body of a Utah man was found inside a vehicle off the shoulder of I-15 Friday night. Now, troopers say they were traveling northbound along the interstate through Bingham County at around 10:30 when they noticed a white 2008 Toyota Camry that was stopped with its hazard lights on. Now, when they stopped to assist, they discovered the driver, a 31-year-old man from Utah, dead from a gunshot wound. The Bingham County Coroner's Office ruled the man's death was a homicide. Now, northbound I-15 was temporarily closed overnight into Saturday morning while authorities investigated the scene. ISP detectives have asked anyone who may have seen the Camry or witnessed any vehicles stopped along I-15 in Bingham County or observed suspicious activity to contact them. So far, no other details have been released. And it's being called a miracle. 4 people were ejected from a motorhome crash that happened over the weekend. First responders say they were dispatched to northbound I-15 north of St. George yesterday afternoon around 3 o'clock. Now, due to the severity of the incident, 2 Life Flight helicopters were also requested. One patient was airlifted to St. George Regional Hospital, and 3 others were transported by ambulance. Now, the Utah Highway Patrol is investigating that crash. The motorhome they were driving was almost completely disintegrated, and troopers saying it's a miracle that all 4 survived. Well, we've got rain and snow continuing in the forecast as we're going to continue to see isolated pockets of precipitation into the rest of the afternoon hours and overnight tonight, as temperatures have been in the mid-40s today. Tonight will drop into the high 20s and then tapering off tomorrow, leaving us with cloudy skies on Tuesday with temperatures around the mid-40s. And then we'll see an increasing chance of rain and snow Wednesday into Thursday and Friday before it'll clear out by next weekend. And news and weather brought to you by Big O Tires, where right now their Ready, Set, Save sale is going on through March 16th. You can instantly save between $80 to $100 on select sets of Nexen, Nitto, and Toyo tires. It's at Big O Tires where their Ready, Set, Save sale is going on right now. Visit Big O Tires and find a location near you. And I'm Will Feelright with your KVNU News Update. Jason Williams and KVNU's For the People show coming up next.
Hi, I'm Wendy, co-founder of Bell Sculpt. I know what it's like to feel uncomfortable in your own skin, worrying about how you look, feeling drained, and just not like yourself. Hormone changes, pregnancy, or aging can lead to weight gain and challenges that aren't your fault. That's why I believe so strongly in what we do at Bell Sculpt. I've had a procedure myself, and it transformed more than just my shape. It boosted my energy, metabolism, and confidence. If you're ready to feel like yourself again, Bell Sculpt is here to help. Book your free consultation at bellsculpt.fm.
News Talk KVNU, 610 AM and 102.1 FM.
I'm Larry Gelwigs, the getaway guru for Morris Columbus Travel and Celebrity Cruises, with the biggest cruise promotion of the year, with huge discounts off your cruise fare and free amenities. Sail the 7 seas in luxury with Celebrity Cruises and Morris Columbus Travel. And for the best travel deals on the planet, give us a call at Morris Columbus Travel.
Come on and get away, Morris Columbus.
Tuesday edition, Clay Travis, Buck Sexton Show. We'll break down the absolute latest. Are there going to be or not men allowed to play in women's sports? The vote up in the Senate. We will be joined by the majority leader, John Thune, to also discuss what in the world is going to happen as we move forward on the budget in Congress coming your way. It'll be the Tuesday edition of Clay and Buck.
10 to 1 on News Talk KVNU, 102 FM and 610 AM. KVNU's For the People with Jason Williams and Bill Walter.
And it is Utah known as the fraud capital of the world. Not because we have more people committing fraud, but because we have so many people falling for it.
Going beneath the headlines and connecting you to the newsmakers.
The radio is a great way to get the word out to a lot of people in an emergency. So we thank you for your help and being a partner with us.
For the People on News Talk KVNU, 610 AM, 102.1 FM, online at 610kvnu.com and on the KVNU mobile app.
Welcome to KVNU's For the People. It is Monday, March 3rd. Just kind of chuckling to myself here as the legislature can be fairly entertaining sometimes. Right now on the House floor, things have gotten a little punch drunk, I think is the term, as they enter the final week of the session. So right now on the floor, I have no idea what's happening because I don't have the audio on, but the video of the House floor right now at le.utah.gov, 2 lawmakers, 1 Democrat, 1 Republican, are twirling. And I assume this is for a reason, but it also might just be the fact that they are in the final stretch of the 45-day session and their brains are melted. It is... I want to say this because I was thinking about some of the comments I made in frustration last week as the legislature. This has been the legislative session of legislative takeovers. In fact, we'll talk about this later on in the show. A bill that would have had it not been held by committee, spoiler alert, it's dead for the session, thank goodness, But this was a bill that would have given the legislature, I'm not kidding you, would have given the legislature control of the Utah Debate Commission. So these debates for statewide offices and occasionally congressional offices, statewide and congressional offices, and occasionally legislative offices as well, would be overseen by the legislators. And according to the language of the bill, the committee they would make up, they get to decide who's on the committee, would also decide which questions and topics could be asked. It definitely is the legislative session of legislative, at least attempts at takeovers. There is, now I understand that this has been worked out with some agreements and some compromise, but there is a bill that takes certain powers away from cities and counties to decide minimum parking requirements or lack thereof, to decide whether homes need or can have garages. Now, I'm not saying that cities are always reasonable on these things. Don't get me wrong. And the legislature may, in fact, be addressing a problem, a real, very real problem. But the legislature should not decide these things. If the legislature wants to put pressure on a city or cities in general to go a certain way with these things, to try and grease the wheels on getting more housing built and occupied, great. That's the legislature's right, and the right of the cities to respond to that, or ignore it, and face the consequences. But for the legislature to just take over the decision-making power, we've also seen the legislature in a really zealous attempt want to kind of take over the judicial system, from giving themselves the right to appoint the Supreme Court justice, the state Supreme Court justice, to creating a committee for judicial review that would be made up of lawmakers. I mean, it's just, yeah. They've disbanded the Utah State Records Committee at this point, a 40-year-old committee. It's been around that long, created originally by Utah's Government Records and Access Management Act, GRAMA as it's known, one of the most heralded transparency laws in the nation. And Republicans in the House this year just chipping away at it. The Senate has been a little more reasonable, but the bill to disband the Records Committee, which I think was a committee that did a good job of protecting the public when a government entity would deny records requested by a member of the media or a member of the public or a member of a certain industry even, it's happened before, the Records Committee would step in and review the process and issue a ruling, basically like a judicial committee almost. That was the objection lawmakers used as the excuse to disband the committee, to pass a law doing away with the Records Committee, and instead give that power to a single administrative judge that would be appointed by the governor. This is all legislative takeover stuff, and they've been at it for years, consolidating power. But it really, in the last two, I think, has hit this almost ludicrous speed, to quote from Spaceballs. And I wish the public would pay more attention and let lawmakers know they're not fans of it. We have three co-equal branches of government: the administrative, the executive office, the governor's office, and that also includes the AG and some others. We have the judicial branch, the Utah Supreme Court, and all the courts on down. And then we have the legislature. There are three co-equal, according to the Utah State Constitution, branches of government. And every time the legislature gets told no, they pass a bill in the very next session to take that power away from whoever told them no. And the Governor Cox is not pushing back on this at all for reasons I will never understand. The courts, though, have. So that's my setup for saying, look, I've been very critical last week especially of some of these moves, because my two big concerns when it comes to the legislature are these patterns we see of disregard and even dislike for transparency and open government, because it slows things down, and just trust them. Don't you know who they are? And also generally trying to consolidate power from the other branches of government. Those are my two big concerns that if I could get people to be more aware of and talk to their lawmakers more about, I would be a happy person. That said, they do a lot of important stuff. And on a lot of issues this session, they've been very careful and thoughtful. Not all. The rush in what was basically a manufactured Twitter storm to pass a law in the first week of the session to dictate to how universities make housing decisions. That was ridiculous and irresponsible, and I guarantee they're going to have to come back and fix that in interim session, probably the first one that will be in April. So they haven't been completely responsible. They've been knee-jerk. They've jumped on some political bandwagons and not thought them through. But for the most part, the legislature in general is very careful and very thoughtful. You also have this healthy tension between the more reactionary, populist House and the more slow-moving, more deliberative body, kind of like the U.S. Senate used to be, Utah Senate. Utah Senate, thankfully, is still like that. And because of that, you have certain situations that kind of take care of themselves. And that is what has happened. So something I griped about very much last week has resolved itself in a pretty decent way, though I still say all of this is happening because the legislature's fees were hurt when the courts ruled against them last year on Amendment D and said you can't lie to voters on the ballot. I'm not exaggerating. That is a very fair encapsulation of what the court rulings were. Lower courts all the way up to the state Supreme Court. You can't lie to voters on the ballot. They have to know what you're asking them to say yes or no to. That angered the legislature because don't you know who they are? And they had 5 bills looking to make some kind of change to the judiciary, from again giving themselves the power to appoint the Chief Justice and making that something that had to happen every 4 years, creating a committee that they would control that would review and rank judges when those retention questions come up on the ballot, should a judge be retained, to a bill that actually sought to change what would happen if a court issued a stay on something the legislature passed. I mean, this is, as Supreme Court Justice Matthew Durant said, this is an all-out assault on the judiciary, a co-equal branch of government. The legislature, feeling the pressure, I think, from the public and realizing that this wasn't a bully pulpit messaging war that they could win, has thankfully discovered some common sense. And there was a big announcement today from Senate President Stuart Adams and House Speaker Mike Schultz. And their statement read, "Our system as government was designed to ensure that each branch operates independently," something they'd been accused of trying to do away with these bills. Yet, they say, also relies on one another to function effectively. At times, this dynamic creates natural and necessary friction between the branches. True. However, we firmly believe that healthy debate and reform do not undermine democracy. They strengthen it. What they announced today basically was they'd reached an agreement with representatives of the judiciary. I assume Chief Justice Matthew Durant and others were a big part of these conversations. And what they decided basically is that so it says, through deliberate debate, thoughtful conversations, and in a spirit of collaboration, the legislature and the judiciary have found a path forward that will make our government stronger and better. SB 203, judicial standing amendments, right to appeal amendments, judicial amendments, joint resolution amendments, basically all the bills that were at issue here will continue to be considered and debated by the legislature with a position of neutrality from the Judicial Council. House Bill 512, judicial retention changes, judicial election amendments, and unnumbered bill file judicial officer modifications, which would increase the number of justices, will not go through the legislative process at this time. So basically, the legislature agreed that they would scrap the bill that would create a committee for them to review and rank judges themselves whenever a judicial retention election was going to be on the ballot. They would also scrap the bill that would give them the right to appoint the Supreme Court justice. And then also they would scrap the bill, which never really got very far anyway, that would have increased the size of the court by 2. So, in short, the legislature sat down with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the Bar Association, attorneys, other judges, I'm sure were part of these conversations as well, and they agreed, okay, we have gone too far. We got out over our skis. If we scrap these 3 bills, will you let us off the hook for these other 4 that we're making more minor changes to rights to appeal and overall, the goal that the legislature has to say when a court issues a stay or an injunction, the legislature can come back and override that. That one, by the way, everyone knows, even the sponsors of this and the Senate President and House Speaker, they know there's a lengthy court process ahead of that one because that asks some constitutional question that isn't answered yet by any legal precedent that can be found. So, again, the legislature feeling public pressure, feeling pressure from the judiciary, realizing they're losing the messaging battle as well on this one. They decided to scrap the worst of the judicial reform bills that had been kind of, to be honest with you, sailing through the legislature so far, unfortunately. But thankfully, the worst of them are dead. The legislature, at this point at least, will not have the power to appoint the Supreme Court justice themselves. They will not have a committee made up of themselves to rank and review judges for retention elections, and they will not be expanding the size of the state Supreme Court. So some good news. And again, to go back to my original point, setting this all up, I criticize. They get their egos are huge. They get their feelings hurt and their toes stepped on, and they overreact in some ways that are often unconstitutional. And it's frustrating to see. And I think the public should be on their backs more for this and letting them know that we're watching, reminding them that we're watching this play out. But all of that said, when push comes to shove, the legislature can be very reasonable and thoughtful, and this is an example of that. A compromise reached and announced by Senate President, House Speaker, and representatives of the Judiciary today that the worst of the legislative takeover of the co-equal judicial branch of government will be put aside for now, at least. We'll be back with more For the People right after this.
It's the Napa Gold Filter Sale, featuring up to 60% off filters for everything from your car, your backhoe, to your side-by-side. Get your machine fired up this season with Napa Premium Synthetic Oils, $3.99 a quart. Napa Synthetic Blend Motor Oils, $3.29 a quart. Seafoam Motor Tune-Up, $7.99 a can. The Gold Filter Sale, now through March 15 at your Preston to Providence Napa Auto Parts.
Napa know-how. Napa know-how.
Disasters don't wait for a convenient time. When the unexpected strikes, call the trusted team at Blue Sky. Remember, Blue Sky is that same great ARS team you know and trust.
This is Tom with Blue Sky Restoration. When disaster strikes, whether it's a flood, fire, mold damage, or an unforeseen accident, Blue Sky will clean up, repair, and restore your home or business like it was before. No disaster is too big or too small. For all your restoration needs, you can trust our Blue Sky team.
With so much financial uncertainty, are you wondering if your retirement savings will last? The market's ups and downs can keep you guessing, especially if you're approaching retirement or considering it. Your Edward Jones financial advisor can help. If you have more questions than answers about what's next, we can work together to help ensure you're prepared for the future. After all, retirement isn't the end of the road, it's a new beginning. Call one of our 11 branch locations in Cache Valley or go to edwardjones.com. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
Welcome back to KVN News For the People. Coming up, Jennifer Tenhovey of the Bridgerland College will be joining us. This was actually a listener-suggested topic that I'm excited to get to. But a listener emailed in a little while ago and said they weren't aware of this, and then they found out about it and took advantage of that, and they said, you should really talk about this on the show because it's amazing. What it is, it's Bridgerland Technical College here in Cache Valley offers something called community courses. And these are very affordable, sometimes single night courses. Sometimes they go on, one night a week for a couple of weeks. But either way, not a huge time or financial commitment at all. And on a wide range of topics. There are all kinds of things you can just go sign up for, pay a small fee, and learn without, committing to a long, 2 or 4 year obligation to get a degree. These are classes that are literally just meant to teach people stuff. And they are open to the community, and there are a lot of them. So Jennifer's going to join us at the start of hour 2 today to talk about that. On the other side of the news here in a few minutes, we're going to talk about marijuana. A fascinating study out today with a great write-up from a couple of different media organizations in Salt Lake. But this is the latest science on. So in 2023, there was a national survey on drug use and health that was done. And it found that nearly 44 million Americans used marijuana in the month previous to taking the survey. 44 million. By comparison, that same report cites 135 million daily alcohol users. So basically, the study noted far more people drink, but high-frequency drinking is less common. In 2022, the median drinker reported drinking 4 to 5 days in the past month, whereas the median marijuana user reported 15 to 16 days of marijuana use in the last month. So basically, far more people are drinking than using marijuana in the United States as of 2023 in this survey, at least. But those who are drinking fewer days in the month as opposed to those who are using marijuana. And so that raised some questions then about health concerns around that. We know some of the data and what it says about, drinking on the regular, how that can affect you negatively. But the research on regular marijuana use, outside of, obviously, we know if it's something that's being smoked, we know that's very bad for you and can lead to lung cancer, whether it's cannabis or cigarettes or a vape. But it is a lot less is known about very consistent marijuana use. And so this study is out. It's the International Cannabis Policy Study. And here's a bit of what they found. Now, some of this data tracks back to 2018, by the way, meaning it's been replicated in each study each year since it started in 2018. And they found marijuana was being used medically for lots of different things, prescribed by doctors, migraines, anxiety, depression, PTSD. And by the way, under Utah's medical cannabis law, you could use it for all of those things, but you could also use it as a pain treatment for, the latter stages of HIV infection, Alzheimer's, ALS, cancer, Crohn's disease, epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, and PTSD are all legal uses or legal prescriptions can be legally written by doctors for marijuana for those things here in Utah, in addition to migraines, anxiety, depression, and things like that. Also, pain and sleep aid in temporary doses, small, short prescriptions. So anyway, the question then that was asked is, how... So first off, we aren't seeing, because of the legalization movements, both medical, like Utah's, but also recreational, like several other states, Oregon, California, Colorado, etc. They aren't seeing a huge uptick. Again, this is just since 2018 when these studies started happening. But the short version of the executive summary is we aren't seeing a huge uptick in marijuana use because of all the legalization. But what we are seeing is more medical science coming in, kind of filling out the story on how THC, the chemical in marijuana that has the effect it has, affects the body. Now, this is a huge mystery still because the research on this didn't start. The most comprehensive research that was ever done was 1988, the Deseret News reports, covering this report put out today. And So not a lot is known about this, and it's referred to as, the Deseret News points out, as the endocannabinoid system, a network of receptors and internal cannabinoids that are active throughout your body. This is why marijuana can be used as a pain aid to reduce stress, to help with nausea, things like that, is it kind of blocks these receptors temporarily. And the argument made by advocates is that it is completely natural. It's derived from a plant, and it leaves your system quickly with no noticeable side effects. But there have been some controversial studies. There was a highly criticized study in 2022 that linked heavy cannabis use to psychosis. That's kind of been blown out of the water at this point. It's not a credible study. But there was a 2024 study from the Yale School of Medicine that notes that heavy and early, i.e., young people using cannabis, there is evidence to support that it is tied to an increased risk for certain mental health issues, specifically depression and anxiety as they age. Deseret News has a great quote as well from neurobiologist Yasmin Hurd, who was part of this international study, and said, so Yasmin Hurd, as a neurobiologist, has done some pretty groundbreaking work on the risk of adolescent use of THC, while at the same time being an advocate for it being prescribed in a medical setting for adults. And that was part of the study as well. And so she said, this was a great quote. She said, I started doing this. People called me a scaremonger and were laughing at me. But she said, not so much anymore. And the evidence is increasingly mounting that too long didn't read on all of this. Not a lot of increased marijuana use from all the legalization that's happened around the United States. No significant increase. The health risks are still a big question in some respects, but mounting evidence that it can be used more safely than many pharmaceuticals in situations dealing with pain, depression, anxiety, nausea, PTSD, all of these things. But also increasing evidence showing that use of THC by anyone in their developmental years, basically up until you're 21, roughly, is extremely risky and is increasingly being tied to some more internal, I guess you'd say, developmental problems that can increase the risk of mental health issues as an adult. So there you have it. The results of probably the most comprehensive study on marijuana that's ever done. Not a lot of increased use with all the legalization and medical programs being set up around the nation. Not a lot of new evidence suggesting it's very harmful for adults, especially in moderation, even when used recreationally. But a growing mountain of evidence saying that even when it's used medically for young people under the age of 21, increasing evidence this is tied to some very bad things. So kind of what we know about alcohol, right? Check it out. I've linked to the study and some of the coverage from the Salt Lake media on our Facebook page, and we'll be back with more of For the People after the news with KVNU's Will Feel Right.
Well, thank you, Jason. Former Utah Congresswoman Mia Love's cancer is reportedly no longer responding to treatment, according to family members. Abigail Love, who is Mia Love's daughter, posted on social media over the weekend that, quote, sadly, Mia's cancer is no longer responding to treatment and the cancer is progressing. Now, according to Abigail, the family has shifted their focus from treatment to enjoying their remaining time with her. According to the U.S. House of Representatives, Love was a member of the 114th and 15th Congresses. Now, she was the first African-American Republican woman in Congress and the first black lawmaker to represent the state of Utah. Now, in November 2009, she was elected mayor of Saratoga Springs, and she was the first African-American elected mayor in the state. Now, Love lost her seat in the U.S. House of Representatives to Salt Lake County's former mayor, Ben McAdams, during the 2018 election. In 2019, she began working as a political commentator for CNN. Well, the Executive Appropriations Committee released its spending list Friday night, showing what was funded by the Utah State Legislature and what wasn't. Now, the powerful committee on Utah's Capitol Hill voted to approve the list, which folds into the $28.1 billion budget that's known as the Bill of Bills. Now, the budget this year is less, which means some cuts in state government. Representative Val Peterson, the House of Representatives budget chief, said that the revenue estimates were down about $112 million. He expressed, though, that Utah still is the best managed state and that they're going to deliver a balanced budget. Now, some of the things that still received funding included $7 million for homelessness services, roughly $2 million to expand nuclear power in Utah, along with $1.7 million to expand geothermal energy. Now, lawmakers are still trying to push for a small income tax cut. Thursday night, they folded a child tax credit and business tax credit for companies to build child care facilities into the same bill. One advocacy group, though, disagrees with that approach, even if they want to see more child care options. And Salt Lake City police say a 20-year-old man was arrested last week after SWAT teams executed multiple search warrants to 2 homes in 2 different cities, resulting in the recovery of a substantial amount of drugs and cash. Now, officers with the Salt Lake City Police Department took Leijah Fritz into custody following an investigation into his alleged involvement in drug dealing. Now, per the investigation, which began last year, detectives obtained court-authorized search warrants for 2 locations, one in Midvale, the other in Taylorsville. Now, last week, those search warrants were served simultaneously. Law enforcement said they found over $1.5 million worth of concentrated THC, marijuana, and also other drugs, and $1,600 in cash. Well, weather-wise, going to continue to see a chance of some isolated rain and snow throughout the area as temperatures have been in the mid-40s today and tonight. We're going to drop to around 29 overnight. We'll continue to see a small chance of some isolated pockets of rain and snow into the morning hours. Then cloudy skies tomorrow. Temperatures expected to be back into the mid-40s. We'll see a small chance of maybe some rain and snow possible for Wednesday, but that'll increase Thursday and Friday before it'll clear out by the weekend. And it's Maple Creek Ranch that brings you news and weather here at the bottom of the hour. They have just a few lots remaining, offering miles of wilderness, streams, hiking, and horseback riding. It's Maple Creek Ranch. If you want more information, Google Maple Creek Ranch. And I'm Will Feelwright with your KVNU News Update.
ABC News, I'm Michelle Franzen. New tariffs kicking in at midnight. President Trump announced 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexico's imports, and China tariffs increased to 20%. Food, clothing, cars, lumber, and oil and gas among the goods imported from America's top trading partners. Jay Young is a gas and oil industry expert, and he expects increases.
We produce about 14 million barrels a day in the United States. We still consume 20 million, if not 21 million barrels a day. We need 7 million barrels, and the majority of that comes from Canada.
Gas prices had been declining, down 5 cents in just the last week, according to government data. In Rome, Pope Francis in the hospital for a 3rd week due to pneumonia. He suffered 2 more respiratory episodes today, according to the Vatican. Fire crews in North and South Carolina fighting 175 wildfires fueled by dry conditions and whipping winds. This is ABC News.
If the cold temps lately have you turning up the thermostat, I've got a more efficient way to keep your home comfortable. Call Cardall's Insulation. That's right, insulation. Now you're probably wondering, does insulation actually go bad? Well, if your home was built before 1980, you should really consider new insulation, because today's insulation is so much better. Even a lot of newer homes don't have sufficient insulation. So if your home is cold, if you feel a draft, call 755-5012. Cardall's Insulation, 755-5012.
From ABC News, Wall Street now. Major market indexes rebounded at the end of a rocky week, ending Wall Street's worst month since April. The Dow was up 601 points at closing. The S&P rose 93 points and the Nasdaq gained 303 points. Asian stock indexes tumbled amid worries about the Trump administration's proposed tariffs on imports to the U.S. New data shows inflation eased over last month, but numbers show consumers slashed their spending by the most since February 2021. Tropicana Brands Group is facing citrus shortages after hurricanes in Florida. The company has seen sales decline in recent years. The Department of Agriculture expects this year's orange production to be the lowest in 88 years. Microsoft is closing down Skype. The company bought the video calling service in 2011 for $8.5 billion. The tech giant says it will retire Skype in May and shift some services to Microsoft Teams. Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
Does your house have that closed-up smell? Do you feel like you're dusting more frequently? Have you noticed an increase in allergy symptoms? It might be time to have your air ducts cleaned. Call a Logan-based business, The Duct Hunter, at 435-770-4813 for a quote and to schedule an appointment.
We are the Duct Hunter. Breathe better, save money, protect your home. We are the Duct Hunter. I want you to tell me why you walked out on me.
A reminder, Jennifer Tanhovey of Bridgeland Area Technical College will be joining us to talk about their community classes. This was a listener-suggested topic. Bridgeland Technical College offers quite a few what they call community classes, and a listener emailed in and said they recently took advantage of one of these, and they don't think enough people know about these. Basically, the community classes are sometimes one-night events, but the goal of the community classes isn't necessarily to, get you a degree or even a certification. It's just to teach you something. And they take resources that are already available for the regular student body, and they just make them available to the community. Some of these are one night a week for a couple of weeks. Some are 1 week, 3 nights a week. Some are one night. And a wide range of topics. They're very affordable. And, again, a listener said, I don't think enough people know about these. It was a great experience. So I reached out, and Jennifer agreed to join us. That will be at the start of hour 2 of today's show when Jennifer Tanhovey of Bridgeland Technical College joins us to talk about how you can take advantage of these community classes that I didn't even know about. I mean, I remember learning this before, but I'd kind of forgotten. So... all right. Coming up in the legislative session over the next few days, you're going to see a lot of debate about a bill that I haven't talked about yet here because, to be honest with you, I don't really understand it. It's House Bill 473, Digital School Materials Amendments. And I finally understood this bill when I saw kind of who was pushing it and who was pushing against it. And it kind of, at this point, makes sense to me. But I'm letting people know because as a parent, which I'm not, you might want to engage on this one. I'm not going to take a position. I'll be honest with you, I don't really know what the better position in this one would be. I do know that some groups that have been very outspoken on the front of stopping censorship and reactionary decisions that could hurt, our understanding and ability to educate effectively here in Utah in the public school system, have opposed the bill. Specifically, an organization called Let Utah Read. Now, this is a group that has opposed the book banning and some of the bills. We didn't see any this year, but last year there were a couple bills that were kind of taking shots at public libraries and things like that, or even school libraries, but even sometimes public libraries trying to restrict certain things from the public based on, kind of a reactionary take. By reactionary, I mean that one of the books that was that is frequently challenged in schools here in Utah is Toni Morrison, written by Toni Morrison. It's called Blue Eyes. And I would actually argue this is an important book for maybe not middle schoolers, but high schoolers to have access to. Because it is a very realistic book tackling some very uncomfortable topics that unfortunately many high school age kids are experiencing at home. And so I would say a book like that could make them feel understood or maybe make their situation make a little more sense to them, it could encourage them to speak out to an adult or an authority figure about what's happening to them at home, which is what happens in the book. The Toni Morrison's book. I don't think it's a good idea to restrict access to these things. I also don't think that a book like Blue Eyes by Toni Morrison is for every child either. So you've got to find it's kind of a middle ground there between banning the book, which I think is never a good idea except in extreme situations, and making sure that it's not becoming a harmful thing, which it could for some students. For the majority of students who read that, it's going to be, let's be honest, for the majority of students who read that, a book like that is just going to be a read that they either like or dislike. But for some students tragically experiencing some awful things at home, that book could be a lifeline. And to see their story told by a famous author, or at least things that resemble their own personal experience. And then in the book, again, the kind of the message of the book is for you to not bottle this up, to speak out, to let an authority figure know what's happening to you. And that's a good message that I think could be very useful for some, again, high school, not middle school age students to be exposed to be able to read. So that's my take on the book banning. Is it's reactionary, and it in the end, really, it tends to defeat its own purpose. In fact, most people probably have never heard of half of these books, including teens who have now all read them, I guarantee you, because you can get them online. But when we're talking about all these banning books from public school libraries, the books become well-known and famous, and I guarantee you every teenager who hears about it says, oh, what is it you don't want me to read? And they go find it online and read it. So it's all a self-defeating exercise, and I wish we would learn that. Back to this bill at hand, it kind of comes from that same world. But that said, there are some legitimate questions around digital materials and digital. So Let Utah Read is opposing it, saying House Bill 473 is just a kind of a book ban bill in disguise. And it's relying on this vague sensitive materials definition of what can lead to an actual book being removed from a school library that the legislature came up with last year. When has the legislature ever regretted being vague, huh? So, this one's causing problems already, that sensitive materials definition. So Let Utah Read is arguing that House Bill 473 is relying on that same vague definition to do the same thing, and they call it more widespread censorship in schools that could actually lead to the cancellation of contracts for vendors of research databases that students rely on for school work in some settings. And it will leave students without high-quality, reliable resources for certain academic tracks, which I'm familiar with that a little bit, and that is true. So schools, there's no less insensitive way to put this. Schools have to pay private entities sometimes for access to certain materials that might come up in a science class or a social studies class, and the schools pay for those usually in a year-long or sometimes 5 years long contract, and this private vendor makes money off the schools for that, but it's also kind of the only way you can get some of these resources that would come up in certain educational tracks. And what Let Utah Read is arguing is that House Bill 473, which is basically just trying to bring the book ban thing to the digital resources that might be in a school library thing, that their unintended consequence here might be that a lot of these vendors say, we're not messing with that. We're not running the risk of getting sued in just your state. We have all these other states that are buying from us. We'll just go ahead and end your contract and refuse to do business with you. So Let Utah Read is saying this runs the risk of cutting off these research databases and leaving Utah out, whereas the rest of the country is still going to be able to have access to them for high school education. That's a pretty big deal. And these databases are again, not something that can be found elsewhere, but through these vendors, for better or worse. That's the word. I would like to see that change in and of itself, but that's the world we live in right now. You have to get them from these private vendors, and it costs taxpayer money. And these vendors are not going to want to mess with this vague law that could have them getting sued. And it's a reasonable argument that they'll just end their contracts or refuse to re-up the contract when it comes up. And Utah high school students won't have access to these same resources that students in the rest of the country have. So they're issuing a plea for everyone to let their lawmakers know to oppose House Bill 473. What backers are arguing here to present that side of it is House Bill 473 just extends the sensitive materials book bans to digital media as well that might be coming from outside the library through these digital contracts. or contracts for digital information. So those are the two arguments, basically. I'll leave it up to you to decide. Honestly, again, I don't know what the, quote, right side of this issue is. I lean towards the let Utah read position because I agree with them on the book banning, that it's a bad idea and is kind of wrong-headed and also self-defeating. For the stated goals of most people behind the book removal push, you're defeating your own goals by trying to remove the books because you just make them famous and now every kid has read them and you just don't realize that yet. Because they find them online when they hear you want to pull them from the school library. That's exactly what happens. We know this, but we don't for some reason every time it comes up. I don't know if that's the same case with House Bill 473. These digital resources aren't something that Utah schools and districts control. They buy them for important reasons, and they are an important part of education and access to information in the school libraries and more. I'm not sure that the vendors will pull out because they're afraid they might get sued because Utah's book ban law is vague. I'm not sure that that's the case. I don't know. I would assume these companies have their own attorneys before they sign a contract. I also think we would see very quickly if that's the case. So I don't know on this one. I'll let you decide. Just telling you about it. House Bill 473. Again, a message from Let Utah Read today, blasted out to inboxes across the state saying this is just a book ban in disguise, but at the same time, it could have unintended consequences that could lead to contracts being ended in Utah classrooms from these digital resource manufacturers and providers, because the Utah's law is so vague that it's not worth it for them to even run the risk of getting sued. Should someone get upset about something in one of these social studies resources about an ancient culture or something like that come through a digital subscription, they'll just not sign contracts with Utah, and Utah students won't have access to things that every other student in the U.S. does. That's their argument. Check it out. Learn about it yourself. Again, it's House Bill 473. I've linked to it on our Facebook page. And backers, again, say this is just extending the same protections the legislature signed off on with their sensitive materials ban in 2024. So, I don't know. We'll be back with more of KVN News for the People right after this.
News Talk 610 AM, 102.1 FM, KVN.
I'm Larry Gelwicks, the getaway guru with Morris, Columbus Travel, and Royal Caribbean Cruise Line. The Quantum of the Seas cruise ship is coming to the West Coast with new Mexican Riviera itineraries sailing from Los Angeles. Enjoy huge discounts off your cruise fare when you book your next Royal Caribbean cruise with Morris, Columbus Travel.
Come on and get away, Morris Columbus.
Nearly 1 in 2 U.S. adults have high blood pressure. That's why it's important to self-monitor your blood pressure in 4 easy-to-remember steps. It starts with a monitor. Be next to talk to your doctor about your blood pressure numbers. Get down with your blood pressure. Self-monitoring is power. Visit managerbp.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, the American Heart Association, and the American Medical Association, in partnership with the Office of Minority Health and Health Resources and Services Administration.
The Above and Beyond Salute.
Hello, this is Bart.
Yeah, good morning, Bart. How long have you been on search and rescue?
So this year makes 31 years.
Well, someone reached out to us anonymously and told us about how you had been on search and rescue for running the command trailer. And how about free lunch for you to Firehouse Subs for being such an incredible guy?
Hey, that's awesome. You know, I work with a lot of great people, and, you know, it's just great to be able to serve.
The Above and Beyond Salute, sponsored by Firehouse Subs on News Talk KVNU.
Kind of spoiled over the last few days weather-wise, so I'm not complaining too much about the gray skies and the precipitation in the forecast. We could still use some. With that in mind, I hadn't updated everyone on this a little bit, but northern Utah snowpack has dipped down to about 94% of normal. We're melting off a bit is what that's saying, but these storms coming through could actually, at least in some parts of the mountains around us, dump some significant snow So we'll see if that turns around a little bit. 94% is still not cause for alarm. It's not as great as the last two winters, obviously, and it's much better than what's happening in southern Utah. Still looking at, they're down to, no, I'm sorry, they're up. Wow, southern Utah up from 24% of normal to 26% of normal in southern Utah, the St. George area. It is dry down there. And I'm not sure, honestly, what 1 year they can probably get through, but I'm not sure what happens if this makes it a second year. Yeah, I don't know. This was a great question. We talked about this on the show when it happened, but after much discussion, the Cache County Council approved the rezone of about 1,600 acres to make way for an expansion of the Powder Mountain Ski Resort. That was at a late February meeting of the Cache County Council. There were a lot of questions and discussions around affordability. Would this be like a schwanky private resort where locals couldn't afford to go, or would locals benefit from this? The interim director of development director, Dirk Anderson, at Cache County said, all of that can kind of be hashed out as we negotiate the master plan, and we'll have a seat at that table. But a listener asked a question that we didn't cover: how soon could any of this actually begin? That is a great question. I reached out to try and find an answer on that, and I did find out from some of the folks involved in just sort of trying to get the ball rolling on this expansion that they're talking years down the road. There's a lot that has to be done. They still have to try and entice a few more investors in and things like that to make it happen. But the county council did sign off on it, so that's a big hurdle. And the promise, at least, from those involved is that the goal is to not create some kind of exclusive elite resort for the wealthy, but to make it something that both the elite wealthy and locals can afford and to enjoy. So, but as far as when exactly, years down the road. Appreciate that question, though. All right, hour 2 of today's show kicks off with Jennifer Tenhovey of Bridgeland Area College on their community classes available to you.